compared to other frameworks and some examples. Okay, let's start. Vue.js is a progressive JavaScript framework for building a single page applications like in front end. Okay, it's created by Vue and introduced in 2013. Okay, and it has some features and things. These are the things going to explain you, and we'll show some examples on this following things. Reactive binding, advantages of Vue, versions and installation, components, interpolation, template tag, directories, event handling, watches, routings, props, lifecycle methods, and state management. Anyway, it's all here. Some of the people having already knowledge in Angular and Vue, React. It is same as like having some similar features like Angular and React also. You can compare with that and you can just analyze things. Okay. First, I am saying about the reactive data binding. Vue will use the virtual. We use suppose the virtual DOM. Virtual DOM is nothing but a copy of a real DOM. Okay. Do you know about DOM? Okay. Everyone knows that DOM, right? Okay. Copy of virtual DOM. Here, the following. You will act like MVC architecture, act in MVC architecture, and here you can see this Vue as a DOM here, and the DOM listeners and directories as a Vue, acting as a middle component, and here the model is a plain JavaScript objects, means the data, whatever holding in a application like here a users list or something and payload, whatever the JavaScript objects will be handled by model. Whenever a change has happened to a model, means if you click on a button or we update an input value, it will listen to the model and model will update the data, and again it will return back to the DOM. First it will update the virtual DOM and then it will compare with the real DOM. Okay, and if whatever the changes in the virtual DOM will be updated to the real DOM. That's all. And here I want to say some common functionalities also. Okay, I will say here these are the advantages. There are more advantages, but I have listed some of it. Virtual DOM, it uses the virtual DOM like Angular. Okay, and it's in small in size. It's easy and it's not like a MBs or something. Compared to the other frameworks, it's little small size of package and easy to understand develop applications compared to other frameworks, Angular and React. It may take some time. Who are the people known Angular will mostly like Vue. Most of the people are converting nowadays into Vue because of it's having a flexibility to extend the framework and some of the equal functionalities in Angular, whatever the functionalities in Angular, all are having in Vue. That's right, and it's easy to integrate and easy to code compared to Angular. That's why most of the developers, I can't say all, most of the developers who like to work in smart way. Instead of writing code, you can write simple things. Those are migrating to Vue. And Vue having two-way data binding and framework flexibility. Here you can extend the Vue functionalities. Still, Vue is not limiting or stopping anything. You can extend the things for Vue. Even if you created a Vue instance, you can add some additional functionalities by yourself, like directives, like pipes. In Angular it's pipes. Here it called as filters and directories wherever it is, and the etc. And it supports the Vuex. Vuex means it's a store management. Most of the people knows about Redux, right? React Redux. Same as like Redux. Here it's a store. Vuex. We call it as Vuex. And now I'm saying about the versions. Okay. Versions. Vue having some versions 1, 2, 3, 4. Right now it's in 4. And I'm going to explain you the version 1, how it is used and how it can we integrate into an application, and what's with an example. Okay, here you can see the features. Vue 1.x is completely on ES5. Okay, it's a standalone thing. You can use the CDN, and you can easy integration to a HTML page. Anyone else know about Laravel? Laravel framework.
PHP.
PHP. Uh, that framework having some advantage with this version of Vue 1. Because of the Vue version integrated to the Laravel, the most of the people are attracted to use Laravel. I mean, instead of other frameworks like Django, Spring Boot, instead of that, already the two-way data binding things and the forms, events, listeners, I mean watches, everything are integrated automatically. Because the Laravel itself having Vue functionality. Starter of component, starter template having the Vue. That's why the most of the people, the Laravel community people are most of the Vue users. Okay. That's why here the ES6, it's all in ES5. Okay, and here it's easy to integrate because of you can use the simple CDN. You can use this CDN and just write your own code, and it's customization extending.
In this session, we are discussing Vue 2 or 1.x.
Yeah, here there is no comparison between the Vue 1 and 2 except the installation and except the installation. Every feature are there in Vue 1 and 2. All features are the same. The directories are not changed. Events, watches, methods, lifecycle methods, everything are same from 1 to 4. It's adding some additional functionalities. That's why I'm just saying here the only installation and usage. In 2, I will explain with the live coding. Okay. Here you are seeing this just to integrate a Vue to a single HTML page is very simple. Here you can see this CDN. You can include this CDN. Once you included this CDN, you have to add one ID, some app or something, your customized ID for acting like a Vue instance. I mean, if you initialize here, you can see the creating a Vue instance by simply having a new class with Vue by passing EL. EL is the reference. EL is a reference for the HTML component. What are the HTML component? You ought to make it as a Vue component. You can just add this ID, and those ID need to be assigned here. And this is the data. In Angular, you are seeing that initializing the data variables. You have seen earlier. You seen the model, right? JavaScript objects. It's a pure JavaScript objects. You can just add a data in this inside of this data object. You can initialize number of objects, whatever the amount you want. You can add it into that. And here you can see the two-way data binding example. Here I just added a two-way data binding example here. Like Angular, you can have an interpolation like this with double curly braces. Okay, simply whatever you have written here will be rendered here. Okay, here I am coming to 2, 3 and 4. Vue version 2, 3 and 4. What's the common functionalities, what are the installation process, everything. Okay, here Vue 2, 3, 4 and it's written in ES6. It supports the ES6 features like arrow functions, it is single and it having a single file components. Here you are seeing that Angular and React people are seeing that single page component. You are separating everything as a component, right? From version 2, Vue supports single file component feature. You can write a page in a single component, single file. You can separate the modules and we can separate the things. And it supports some template tags. Template tags means if you for conditional rendering in some use cases it needs a template tag, because it's instead of rendering giving a div or something, you can use template tag for temporary things. Temporary things means I will show an example about this template tag. And the directories, you also have this version 1, 2, 3 having the same directories and it having some pattern. I will show you that and it having a filters like pipes, whatever it is in Angular. Here it called as filters, and here the computed properties. Computer properties, I will show the example about the computer properties also. Computed means nothing but here I will show an example. In a form there is a two fields, first name and last name. Okay, but you need the full name. For that, what you will write? Just you will write first name plus last name, but you can't get in a single variable. Here the computed means in computed having some variables. We can initialize some variable in the computed property. For that we can add a function. In that function we can write the logic. Instead of every time what are the last name updating, create a one variable with a computed thing. Adding a one variable as full name, adding some functionality to that. First name plus last name. It will automatically, every time the data updates, it will listen automatically. It will listens automatically. And here the installations prerequisites is it needs an npm or node package manager, and it having a Vue CLI. It's having a own CLI to create the environment and to run the Vue project. Here you can see the comments npm install -g global Vue CLI for installing Vue CLI, and to create a new project we can use this command of Vue init. Here you can use some Webpack or Browserify to convert your ES modules ES6 to ES5 for a production thing. And you have some, initially it will provide some commands, run, build, everything will test. It will be automatically initiated, and the default URL will be configured as localhost 8080 for this. And here the example. In Vue 1, we are using only one HTML with some adding some content in the div ID app. We added some content here, right? In Vue 2, just you have to assign initialize some ID to the HTML page. From the div, it acts as a Vue component. You don't need to write any HTML code there. In that div, you will write all the code in the extension of app.vue. Vue file extension, single file component support are there. Here I said that single file components, right? That feature is this one. You can write a set of block or a page or whatever you want as a component. You can define like this. Here I am defining app.vue, creating a new component called app.vue. In this, I am using this template tag. Vue having some format. Template is for HTML. You can write pure HTML. React having some JSX formats. JSX having some class names. Vue doesn't have that standards. You have to write some class names. There is no renaming for HTML. You can write plain HTML in this template tag. Whatever you have written in this template tag will be attached to this app component. For this, you have to write some script tag. Whatever you want to write as write in that component, props, created thing, initialization, destroy, update things, everything. Whatever the JavaScript code you can write here by having a export default. With here the set of things, data, to handle the data objects, whatever you are writing in state, in Redux state. Here the Vue having some data function. In this you can write some initialized variables and you can assign values. Just here my goal is to display welcome to Gyan. Here the Gyan is a dynamic value because it's coming from the name. You can see this. I just initialized here the name, declared the name and initialized some value, and just rendering welcome to Gyan with some interpolation. Here the interpolation is same as like Angular with the double braces. Angular doesn't support the objects to display without having a pipe. Here you can display objects also without using any pipes. If you're having some set of JSON array or a JSON object, if you simply specify here, it will render. It doesn't need any pipes or some things. And for styles, especially for styles, you can specify here, and it's having some parameters. You can specify the language type also. If you are using SAS, you can specify lang SAS. If you, yes, a CSS. And whatever your format, if it is in CSS, compiled CSS, you no need to specify anything. If you are using some non-computed thing, preprocessors, you have to specify compulsory. And there is a keyword called scoped.
Sorry?
Scoped. The advantage of scoped is having only the CSS access to the particular component. I will show examples for that.
Can we have more than one component in that?
Yeah, I will show you an example for that. It's an advantage. Here, this is the component system. This is a sample app. Here you can say this is a sample app with some list of components and dashboards, a header, right sidebar, something. Here you can see this. The initial one is app component. Starting. This is the one. In that, I have created a 3 components. One is header, second one is content, third one is chat box. Okay, these 3. In this, I have created some content block component. Here you can see these 2. And here the list of users. Each user. This here you can see this component and this both are same. Just I am replicating those for reusability just now. And here the 3. These 3 are users. User 1, user 2, user 3. The each component having the some values, name, photo, something. Here in every framework having some lifecycle things, lifecycle methods, and if you having, these are the list of these are the some lifecycle methods. I'm going to, now you are seeing that before created, before mounted, before updated, before destroyed. The name, function name itself having some meaning. Whenever a component created, before creating the component, it will call the before create function. Whatever you have written in that function, it will be called automatically whenever the particular component created. Whenever it created, if you want to call some data, whenever the list of a table, users page is rendering, you want to call some users, you can just specify there in the create method, or you can directly use the code. This is the mount and mounted. Mount and mounted means rendered or not. Rendering or before rendering. Here, because of you have seen some element and template tags in the code. In this stage, I will show with an image. I have an sample image about life cycles. Yes. Every component having this life cycle. A new instance is initiated, it will call a new init events and life cycles. Okay, it's before creating the component. What you have to do? You want to call some API call. This page is rendering. User called this page or some logging things, whatever you want. In this created, you can init or once init and injections and reactivity. Init means once it's past this before create, it will call all, it will initiate all the things. If you specify some methods in methods, if you write some methods in the component, it all will be executed. It will all will be compiled. Just know that once you it call the created, it will call the, it's simply like you can say it as there is a constructor, right? Every class having some constructor. It acts like a created, acts like a constructor thing. That's all. And component Vue supports 2 types of references for a component. You can specify the ID, like ID app, whatever we define in HTML. ID. that block will be access view, and we can specify the template. Angular having the template URL, style URL type of things, right? You can also in Vue also having that feasibility. You can directly write your code here. I will show you this also. And here having compile this, Vue will compile the template into a render function. You all knows about render function. React people having the more awareness about the render function, right? As like React, here also it will use React render function to call whenever it update the data, whenever the data is updated, whenever the destroyed things happen, and whenever the value changes happen, it will call the render function. By that, it will re-render the data. And the before mount. Before initializing this template to the Vue instance, before rendering those things, it will call mounted and before mount and mounted. Before update and update. Here, for example, if you change one value for an object, for an HTML, JavaScript object, you modified some value, it will call the before update and update. If you want to know about the changes, you can use this before update and update it. And whenever the component is destroyed, it's invisible from the screen. Whenever it is invisible from the screen, it will call the destroyed. Before destroyed automatically. Okay. That's about lifecycle methods. Let's. Okay. Okay. Let's start coding. We'll write some. We'll create one Vue project, and we'll add. Explain you how it behaves and what are the files, what's the project structure, and everything. And we have seen that Vue init command, right? I'm using Webpack and some project. Okay, Vue will ask some of the questions while creating a project. With you need some name, customized name or whatever I have mentioned there, and the description of the project and author, and what you want. It's for runtime, and Vue supports gzip compression of this JavaScript files. Because of that, only the Vue called as small size project. Okay. And right now we are planning to run the development also. For that, I am selecting this Vue router. Vue router means every framework having some router functionalities. Vue having itself a package called Vue router. It will default. It will create automatically some default routers like home, about, and linting. Linting here the most of the developers need this to maintain the code quality. Here we will show some popular ESLint standards, Airbnb and standard one. Unit tests you can configure all by default. Mocha, just Mocha, sorry. If you want to E2E testing, we are also having the E2E testing, and you can customize yourself. NPM, and I have NPM, that's why I'm using NPM. Once you select this all things, it will download some default template from the Vue repository. This is the format of creating by using command, and Vue 3 having these functionalities in UI. You can create project by using the GUI. Vue 3. This is right now I'm creating the Vue 2 project. Okay, this is the Vue 2 format, creating a project, and Vue 3 having some special features. For that, you can simply GUI tool. It's some tool, and it will list all your Vue projects by default, whatever in the particular folder, and if there and it shows some options like create project with whatever configuration we have seen here, like ESLint standards, packages, router. There you can create. You can just choose the options, and you can create the project by using GUI instead of using templates. Okay, let's see what's the project structure in Vue 2. Okay, I'm open with code. Some of the set of files and folders here. Initially, I'm using here I'm using npm. That's why it's created. Installed. Sorry. By default, there is a set of dependencies added: Vue and Vue router. Vue will be the default one. I chosen the Vue router is required. Then it installed Vue router also, and it having some set of comments for development. You can use dev and start also. It's for simply running the dev environment. It's for with configurations. Every project need some configurations. Configuration files will be there, like API URLs, version, app version, some third-party S3 bucket URL, some supporting server URLs. Whatever you want to configure, you want to use in the common thing. I mean, instead of replacing all the files, you can replace in configuration file. It's enough. Vue supports the configuration files. Here you can see this config folder. It's environment based. There will be some dev environment having host, port, what are the default port and host to be run in development environment, and what about the linting, if you want to use lint or not. Lint errors, want to show the lint errors.
All this is part of index.js.
Index.js.
Right?
It's configuration, default base configuration. The dev and prod will override this.
Okay.
These are the default, because development needs the lint errors and needs some default port and localhost. Production not required, right? For that, here it's
Also refresh at the type of bootstrapping this can we ask to allow, you said ES6, right?
yes,
But why created JS files here?
J
ES
it's
TypeScript support is there.
TypeScript support is there. Then for if you want
Can
to
you write
using
class in JS file?
yeah, yeah, you can write. Yeah, I will show the example if you want. Also. I mean, you can write class files. Class files you can export the instance also. For you can create the instance for a class and you can export. It can be accessible by the other Vue component also. It's not here. It's just a configurations like environments. Environment.dev.ts prod.ts is there for Angular, right? Like that here also. Here it's added some customizations. I mean, so many people will concentrate on code, not initial stage. Instead of linting things and everything, at the time just they will update this configuration and they will do it itself. So some people are not like to be having. Whenever you run the application, it will automatically open it in browser. Some people not like. For that, if you want to off, you can having some configurations like some for development purpose only. Okay. And for build, what are the default HTML file? What's the location to copy, and what's the file folder name? And here it supports some static directory, separate static directory. You can use separate folder for that. It's your customization. You can update here, and you can production zip. You want to compress the files or not? And what are the gzip extensions? What's the files need to be compressed? And this is for report. What's the you having some reporting thing? I will show the comment. Okay, it's not having that. Vue having some feature called some reporting feature. I mean, whenever you build the project, it will show some review about what file name and the size, what's the state of the file in overall project. Overall project having 3 MB. In that, what's the portion? It will show some chart views, pie charts, bars. It will show it in the graphs to just analyze the people, and it will show some things like if a image is more than 1 MB, it shows that it's not compressed. Please compress this. It will show some errors. Let's support in building. And okay, here you are seeing the configurations. Just here you can see this. If I want to add some variable like API URL, base URL, you can just specify like this. Sorry. If you specify like this, you can use like process.env.api URL. Wherever you want in application, you can use like that. I will print this in one component. This is the initialization of, having the custom envs. Okay, and this is the prod one, production for building purpose. This is for testing. If you want to run unit tests, things you can write here.
When you build in Vue, so this configuration is also part of the build.
Yeah.
So if I want to change some after the build, I want to change some endpoints.
No, it will not pass.
Okay.
Before building only, you have to specify the URLs. Let's say it's having 2 folders, 2 files, right?
That's right. There are some use cases here.
For that, they can.
After they don't want to rebuild it, just for one configuration change.
No. Because it's in compressed, right? You have to search it and manually edit it. Yes, right. And you having another feasibility, like if you want to add some stage environment, you can just do a replica of this div, name it as a stage. Okay, and you can specify some staging here by copying this div object, and you can add your command here.
So
instead of dev.config,
at the time of build, where exactly you are specifying the environment here?
Environment here.
Yeah, at the time of building.
Building, it will automatically grab this paths. I mean, there is some set of standards for that.
There is another environment file.
Okay.
One for development or
Okay.
production.
Yeah.
You want to generate build for production. So the same command won't work, right?
Won't work. It having some build.
Where exactly you give the environment file path. Do I need to specify something environment is system?
Okay, you can specify like the for here I need stage environment.
Okay, here the config you are saying that is a config that you want to use.
Yeah, you can update the stage config with build configuration. Okay, based on the configuration object like dev or build, it will act like. If you having the build configuration, it will build the project. If it having the development project, the running configuration to start a development server, it will act like a server. Based on the configuration, it will act. It will execute. Okay, this you can say this config file is completely about dev and building configuration. Okay, and it having some separate folder like build. Here you can see this. Here the build folder is specially meant for adding some plugins. Some if you want to add some third-party libraries, linting rules, what are the file formats, everything will be included in this base config file. build having some base config. Here you can see this. This is the directory name and linting rules. You can specify some linting rules here. And here you can see this entry file. What are the entry file? You can customize your entry file. By default, it will be in main.js. You can customize it. Okay. And there is a special feature in Vue. You can see this. You must learn this first because it's a special feature in Vue. I don't know whether Angular and React having this. You can specify some folder with your customized name. Are you getting my point? Here you can see this source folder.
You can modify.
You can name it
Okay.
your customized name. Here source folder is there for code. Here you can see this source. Every Angular having the app folder. Here it's a source folder. I'm naming instead of maintaining as a source. Instead of writing some dot slash dot directory structure, I will simply specify at the rate. At the rate means source folder. It will point out to the source folder. In that form, I will call using it.
Aliasing.
Yeah.
So the concept is also there in Angular.
Is there? Okay.
It's called aliasing.
Okay. Aliasing. And here the loader configurations, view loader. If you use some preprocessors like stylized SAS, you can those configurations will be maintained here. This all build folder is all about running the development version and building rules, everything. Because Angular having Angular.json file, in Vue having this build folder. You can say I can simply match this. And here for code, it will create a source folder with some default templates, and this static folder is meant for maintaining static files. Because why? Because there is a problem with static files like font. If you compile that font files, Vue compiler doesn't know about .tff, .wff files. To avoiding that errors, we will simply maintain here. We will create some font folder here, and we will maintain the static files here. We will include it in wherever we want. We can include it. Application. Here, by default, I am going to the code now. Okay. Vue having some starter file. Named call as main.js. Okay. It's same like React in some cases. Here I can say like React, it's just having some importing an app component, rendering like this. Same pattern, somewhat of, okay, root component. And here it's having some router configuration for URLs. For all routes, it maintains a separate file called router.js, index.js, and here I'm creating a new Vue instance with the reference of this HTML file. Here you can see this ID app. I'm giving this part for Vue to rendering the dynamic content and every remaining things. And just I'm adding some router configuration. What's the route URLs, and here the components. Initially, what are the components need to be initialized? Just Vue app and template. What are the template tag? What are the HTML code need to be written by default? Just rendering the app. I just calling the app. That's all. And now I'm going to show you a component. What's the app component having? Here you can see this. This is the default Vue code. I set up this template tag, right? It's a pure HTML code. You can see this. Okay, and this is the image tag having some asset directory. in it's a logo or something. Yeah, here the logo file. It's calling that just rendering the image file, and this router view is like rendering the children components. Router URLs. Sorry. If you are specifying any routes matching to the specified component, it will render in that. It having some childrens. I mean, I will show the childrens. What about the childrens in Vue? Nested routes. We can call it as nested routes. Okay. Here, this is the JavaScript layer, and this is the styles. Okay. Here, the router. Initially, we have only one component with the requirement of home page. Just I am importing this hello world component using the source aliasing at the rate. Slows hello world component. Hello world component having some documentation related to Vue. I'm rendering this component by using like this. Here there is a routing format, which is path, name, and component. What are the component you want to render this? Okay. Now I'm going to show you this. I'm going to run this. For running this Vue 2 project, there is a command npm run dev. Okay. Before that, you have to install.
So in that index.html.
By default, it will run on localhost 8080. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Here you can see this. This is rendering from app.vue. This is the hello world component. Because of the router is slash. If I specify something other than the slash, the hello world component is in. Okay. Because of the slash is configured for the specific component. Here you can see this code. In routers, the path slash is configured with hello world component. I will just update this hello world component. Now you can see this hello world. This is the pattern to define a routes for any component in Vue.
Do you call that outlet of the route? Where do you route that slash component? In Angular, we'll be having the router outlet.
Yes, here the router outlet. Here also.
What do you call it?
Router view, sorry.
Router view.
Yeah. Okay, router view. Router view. I will show the nested routes also. Nested routes also you have to use this router view only. Here we are having the hello world route, right? Here I will show some examples using this two-way data binding, lifecycle methods. Okay, now we have this. Welcome to Vue.js, right? I'm going to render this. Okay, here you can see this. I'm just rendering this. Welcome to Vue.js. This is the interpolation in Vue, and I'm going to add some methods, lifecycle methods. whenever it is created, just to console log component is created. Okay. Here you can see this. The component is created. If you go another route, if you open another route, it will not be created. Again, if we go back to the router, the same route, the component is created. Whenever it's create, it will call the created method, and I will write the destroy method also. Destroyed, component is destroyed. And with some routing things, routing from app.vue. In Vue, for adding an anchor tag, how to use some doubt. I'm initializing some dummy router. Now you can see this how when it's creating. Now it's created, right? Component is destroyed. Now, whenever we go back to the same component, it's creating. Like this, the component lifecycle method, Vue lifecycle methods will be executed based on the stage. It's updated whenever it's updated, created, destroyed, mounted. Okay, and two-way data binding. I'm going to show you how it works and what's the two-way data binding in Vue with an example. Okay. Now I'm going to edit this message. Okay, I want to edit this message. I'm creating one input with Vue having some prefix like ng in Angular. Vue having some prefix like v hyphen. I'm just attaching this message to here with some message you entered. Okay. Yes, here the welcome view. Here we can see the two-way data binding. By simply adding for inputs, input or select box, it's a key of Vue model. It's all in Vue directories and the functions or event handlers are using by v hyphen, and it having some conditions like I will show the conditional rendering also with the same example. If the message having some text, it should display you entered something, or else it should be invisible. It should not. Initially, I am giving for a message with if message having some value, it should show this. Initially, there is no value for input box. Once it entered something, it's a conditional render. Okay, v if it supports v if else also. V switch, and there are more directories, and there are two types of binding things here. For adding some value like IDs, we use binding the value to an attribute like ID or something. I'm just adding some ID with some variable. My ID equal to yeah. Here I am giving this variable as my ID. It will automatically bind to that variable. Here you can see this.
Shall bind with the property bind interpolation.
No,
Double clever places.
in Reactive. Here it's a binding thing.
Can we write directly ID equal to
No, we can directly write a ID.
ID equal to quotations of double flower braces.
Okay, you are saying that adding interpolation. Okay.
Can we write
Concatenating type of things. Interpolation is this one for IDs, attributes.
okay.
For attribute.
I'm asking, can we write like ID equal to quotations of uh, um, double flower braces?
Okay, double flower braces.
See,
ID.
remove that V bind.
Okay. Oh, you are asking like okay instead
my
of that.
ID, my ID, keep that my ID in double flower braces. Is it possible?
Yeah, I can write like this, but means
Okay.
because here itself it's acting as a variable, right?
Okay. Okay.
React having doesn't have that
Okay.
things. There you need to specify it's an object. Here it's not required. By default it will be accessible. My ID is it acts. I mean, if you have this bind symbol, automatically it will treat as a JavaScript. Okay, you can write expressions also here. Ternary operators, whatever you want, you can write here. That's the thing for binding. If you want to add some events, here we have on on for events, event handling.
Then event name
Yes,
after semicolon.
that's all. I want to call this pop message. Whenever it clicks on that message, okay.
When you are writing the function pop message inside of that method,
Whenever the click has happened, it should call something or it should do something, right? I'm instead of writing JavaScript there, I'm adding one function in the view, and just I'm calling that function. I may have multiple attributes, multiple functions need to be written, right? It's based on your requirement. That's all.
as you written like a destroy function also can
Okay. You are saying that why here? Okay.
function pop message.
Okay.
Function.
No. View having some separate thing like methods. In that you can write the methods because it takes us view dot methods dot method name.
Then why you don't take the destroy method inside of the
No, it's a lifecycle methods. In that it's an methods also there.
predefined method so that we should not miss
It's
there is no
predefined.
need to define inside of method, right?
No. View having some patterns for defining the methods. Okay, methods, props, components, all will be created in some different with some view having some default properties name. Okay, name already having that date function already there. We are overriding the date function and methods to define the methods.
Custom.
Yeah, custom methods. Whatever you want to write a custom methods need to be within that
should
method.
be inside
Methods. And if you want to
variables in data.
yeah, variables in data.
Data
Data in
initialization.
Initialization. That's it. Data having some, but we have to write like this format to
those
return this.
variables treated like global variables.
No, within the component. It can be accessible only
Within the component.
within for this component only. Only the
For
hello
that particular component. Inside of that particular component, if I have more than one template, then
you have to pass this data to the another template by using props. There is a concept called props, accepting values from parent to child. Component to component interaction can be happen by using props. I'll show you the props also. Okay, app.js having some value name something. Okay, I want to pass this app dot. Okay, this is the router, right? No. Okay, I will create one component, same like hello world.
Is there any command to
No, no,
generate
no.
a component?
Vue CLI 2 having that. I want to pass some ID to this component. Okay. I don't want to initialize any variables here. As like methods, there is a props. There is props, and you have to define the props here. I'm taking ID from parent component. It's to be input value.
It's like it's the attribute.
Yes. Now I will import this test and I will render in that component. Okay. Here I'm going to render here. First I have to import the component. Import test. Okay. How to register here? What are the components I am using from
These
outside of it?
importing should be inside of script.
Yes, that should be inside of the script. And I'm using this test component as test. Got it? I'm using as a test. If I call like this, it will show an error. Oh, it's not showing error because we doesn't specify that it's a required parameter. It's not a required prop. If you specify it as a required prop, then it will throw an error. It requires at least one parameter. Now I'm going to pass like this. Oh, some ID DD. I will update the value. Whatever the message has been updated here, I want to send to this component. Okay. Whatever I had typed in the text box will be rendered in hello world component and test component.
Can we pass any attributes to template directly? Any attributes?
Yeah, you are passing the data by using props, right?
We are passing.
Same way.
No. Like you have mentioned one component template component.
Yeah.
To that directive, can I pass any ID or particular class name to that template?
Oh yeah, you can specify that. You are asking for this.
More than one template in the component.
You can specify class
Can
here.
I differentiate with the for the parent template?
Oh yeah. Okay.
Question. Research on Wakiali.
No. Can I have more than one template component in a single file?
Can.
We can have, right?
We can have.
How can I differentiate that template to this template?
Just specifying some ID or something, name, passing data, individual data. Before I have shown you something like 3 components, right? Here. Like this. You are saying like this. These 3.
Template directive, hai na? We have direct template directive, right?
Yes, you can specify IDs here.
I'm not asking. Element.